I want to talk about the word meme. And a meme is just an idea or a thought or a word. Its equivalent in biology would be a gene. And I've read that there are thoughts that memes replicate just like genes do. So genes replicate in biological reproduction, and memes get passed in the form of thoughts and everything through our brains and our brain cells. And lately I've been having more insights about the whole ego me thing. The ego is the me. And it's interesting that meme is spelled M-E-M-E, which is me. So it's something in my mind that gets passed from one me to another me. So me. Not only that, is once it is in someone's brain, in order for it to replicate, it has to happen more than once. Unless somebody, I think it does have to happen more than once. If somebody has that meme and then wants to pass it on, they at least have to process it and think about it again to pass it on. And even if they forget about it after that point, it still was a me in their mind. So it goes from me to me, from ego to ego. And I might have talked before how I'm really seeing that language is really a virus. It gets stuck in our brains. So memes are kind of like word viruses. And I guess some could be more positive than others. Actually, when I first had a scary experience of altered states of consciousness, otherwise known as psychosis, at one point when I would look at the computer, there would be stuff that was probably there or not there. I actually might have taken a picture of this one, but I can't remember. But it was just a totally benign website I was looking at. And in the top margin it said, language is a virus. So when I was in that scary state of consciousness, I was seeing scary messages everywhere. So I'm looking at the computer, it's saying language is a virus. I'm looking at language and I'm thinking, what do I do? And it freaked me out. But I'm seeing now that it's really true that language is a virus. We can use language, or language can use us. And I think most of the time it uses us because we're conditioned by thoughts, we're conditioned by education. And J. Krishnamurti talks a lot about this. And I'm not saying his name in order to say I'm representing him or even know what he was talking about. I don't per se. I've studied his stuff for probably 8 years. But it's only now that I'm actually really starting to see what he's saying. And I know throughout the process of studying his writings and his talks on YouTube, I always have some level of, I see what he's saying. But with his talks and his writings, that I see what he's saying always keeps going. It's continuous. It's not, I see what he's saying conceptually and then try to memorize it or forget about it. You actually see what he's saying or you don't see it. It's not about actually being like, yeah, that makes sense. It's about actually really seeing it. So there's a very subtle line between agreeing with it and conceptualizing it and actually seeing what he's saying. And I feel like perhaps I'm getting to the point where I'm actually seeing what he's saying with regards to the language aspect. I could be deluding myself. I have to just drop it and keep learning. But what I'm saying is that some of my insights are similar to stuff that he says. He says it in a different way, but I've been kind of coming up with it or seeing it. It appears on my mind screen as I see this without actually listening to or reading his teachings. I'm actually observing it within myself. So I'm actually reading that within myself. And I'm not sure where else we can really read things from but within ourselves. And even if I think about my experiences of so-called psychosis, it's always thoughts, it's always words, it's always language. So I've gotten to the point where I've come really close to ending my life because I'm taken over by this language and these images attached to the language, and also these felt feeling senses in my body. And it's all like an attack of language, of memes. And I don't know where they come from, but Krishnamurti talks about how when you see this ego structure of thought and how dangerous it is, you move away from it like you would if you saw a snake. You wouldn't think twice, you would just move away from it. So in that way, I'm seeing that if I do have any kind of thought that's anything that resembles something that could become associative and lead to a spiral into being taken over by a thought structure that could lead me into a so-called psychosis, I actually kind of jump away from it internally, like I just saw a snake. Like it's not something I want to play with or entertain in any way, shape, or form. And to me, that process of insight is sort of the protective thing against the thought. Because if there is some kind of weird thought structure, the insight sees that it's a snake instead of identifying with it and sort of taking the snake and wrapping it around one's waist or neck. It's just like, whoa, like, no, that's not something I want to go near at all. And I don't know if that's true at all, but since my last psych ward experience and how terrible it was, I feel like I'm really more attuned to watching for those snakes. Whereas before I might kind of be like, oh, whatever, and sort of have that energy dwelling a bit versus really seeing, whoa, that's not something that I want to even think about. It's a very subtle thing, and I don't know if it's really working or if I am actually doing something with that. I won't know unless I become hospitalized. I'll know that I wasn't able to do it, but I feel like I said, more attuned to it. My mom actually told me an interesting story. She said when she was young, she had these sort of seizure-like freezing experiences where she wouldn't be able to speak for I don't know how long. And her aunt once told her, if you keep that up, you're going to end up at the psych, whatever the facility was called, that it was for long-term people that were chronic. And this was, say, 50 years ago, when people just went into institutions and didn't come out. And my mom told me that after her aunt said that, it never happened again. And maybe it was some kind of coping strategy my mom developed. And I don't know how many times it happened, she didn't say. But she basically said that when her aunt said, keep that up and you're going to end up institutionalized, something changed within my mom and it never happened again. And I thought that was really interesting because she shared that with me sometime after my most recent hospitalization. And I feel like since my recent hospitalization, not that it was good before going to the hospital, but I was maybe a little bit more careless because I knew, oh, if I go there, no big deal. Like, it wasn't that bad. But now I see what could happen, so it's almost like that fear of going back. And so the fear of going back leads me to be more insightful about the things that could bring me fear and lead me to going back. So it's a little bit of a subtle difference, because if I'm just afraid of going back, that's going to cause more fear. And if I have a fearful thought that's kind of like something I might think in psychosis, it'll actually feed into that fear and make it worse. So my fear of going back is actually not being afraid of going back, which I wasn't before. But the subtle difference is now I have to really exercise my mind to not tap into that fear that sometimes allows the fear to accumulate to the point where I eventually get to a space where I'm thinking in terrifying ways that would actually lead me to go back to the psych ward. So my fear of the psych ward is making me more watchful of my fear, not that I'm actually physically being afraid of the psych ward. So in my mom's case, that extreme fear of going back or going to be institutionalized kind of snapped her into a place where she didn't allow herself to go there to produce that reaction of being somewhat catatonic that might lead her to go there. So in the same way, I'm more watchful and perhaps snapped into a place where I maybe internally won't allow myself to go there. And that's just a theory, because anything could happen, really. But I liken it to the same sort of thing. And I guess it's just really being a little bit more responsible for my inner self. And it's all nice in theory. I feel like I'm practicing that because I haven't had those sort of thoughts that might get me to end up back in the psych ward, so that's a good thing. Plus, also knowing that if I end up back there, it'll probably make it worse and not better, because that's what happened last time. So knowing that I don't really have a safe place to go, and the safe place I went before might make me worse, then I'm even more watchful of myself, because I feel a little bit like I'm on my own with it. And the thing with the meme too, the me, that's what our brains are doing all the time, is me. And I talked before in a video about how there's things classified as thought disorders, and I don't know anything about that. I'm not a doctor or anything, but Krishnamurti would say that thought is disorder. So this ego thought, this me, is actually disorder, because it's not actually real. It's an abstraction, it's conceptualization, and it's not actually representing what's going on right now. And it's conditioning and programming. And when we think about the moments in life when we really feel alive, it's actually when we are not thinking about ourselves. So if we see a really beautiful baby or beautiful sunset and we're awestruck, and in those moments our ego is rendered silent and we feel this sort of bliss and peace. Well, the opposite of that is the ego chattering on about stuff. And then there's a lot of people that want to do extreme sports in order to get the ego to be quiet. And when people get really good at that, they call it flow. They're just like in the zone, they're in the flow. And Stephen Kotler and Jamie Wheel are doing a lot of research around this. And in my mind, we shouldn't necessarily need to get to the point where we're extreme athletes or jumping out of a plane every day to get our ego to be quiet. There's likely an easier way. And in my mind, if the ego is quiet, then we're actually in flow in daily life nearly all of the time. And it's not that mysterious, actually. And I talked in another video about when a person first experiences, say, a mania, it feels so ecstatic and wonderful. And I really am beginning to think it's because it's just something we're not used to. So a beautiful sunset might remove the ego mostly for a minute or two, but now imagine it's rendered silent for a month, and really, really silent, and doesn't mean there's not any thoughts going on, but it's something new and creative and wondrous, and that would feel really good by virtue of it just being something completely different. The ego doesn't feel good, and it takes a lot to actually make it feel good, and usually that's just a pleasure response. So thinking something pleasurable makes us feel some pleasure, and that makes it easier to get through the day. And that's what a lot of the self-improvement stuff is on that level. And that's an important level as well. But it's still the level of the me. Any kind of thought and thinking is the level of the me. When you're awestruck by a beautiful sunset, you don't need a thought to make that happen. It's just seeing, it's perception. Now imagine if that perception could be just as wondrous and blissful when looking at a sunset to just looking around in daily life. And I just had deja vu, like I said that before, and I might have on a different video, but I actually don't remember other than deja vu. I thought that was like a new thought, but maybe not. And that's the thing with making these videos. I probably repeat myself, but I don't remember at all. And I think that's okay. If I come up with the same thing twice, maybe that is a good thing. And this again is more collapsing a wave function as a conversation with myself. It's not meant to be about right and wrong. It's not meant to be uber spiritual or philosophical or scientific. It's just whatever. And that's what the experience of mania is like. It's like looking at everything new, looking with new eyes, looking afresh, not looking through the mind screen of the ego thinking about 1,000 yesterdays. It's not actually something that mysterious or profound. It's just the same as a child would look at the world. They don't yet have all these thought structures given to them, and they have this energy and joyousness about them. Who says we can't be like that as adults? And what is it that gets in the way of that? The ego gets in the way, the me, the thinking mind. And we don't understand, or we don't know that there's actually something that operates beyond that. We're just so used to the ego thinking mind that we think that that is necessary. And it's not. And the ego thinking mind reality sucks. We already know that. That's why so many people are doing meditation and yoga and extreme sports and illicit drugs and eating food and zoning out with TV. It all zones out the ego. It all numbs us to that, numbs out that thinking process. Now, if you think again about the sunset, that sunset blew away the ego thinking process. Now, do we require a sunset to make that go away? No, it's more looking from that level beyond the ego. When we see that sunset and it puts us in awe and makes the ego be quiet for a moment, can we look from that place beyond the ego, that quiet place? That quiet place is always there, but we don't know how to look from that place because we're always looking through the ego. And so many people are spending a lot of money trying to get to that quiet place by doing mindfulness and all this stuff. And it's important for sure. But it's actually our natural ability to look from that quiet space. So can we look at everything in our daily life like we're looking at the most beautiful sunset we've ever seen for the very first time, like we've never seen it before? Can we look at a human face that way? With awe and wonder and curiosity and just being struck by the beauty of another living human being. How is that less beautiful than one's favorite mind-numbing TV show? Since we're not looking in this way, we need so much entertainment and entrainment, and we're just numbing out, and we're not really even here that much. We're not actually in reality. We're in this pseudo-reality entertainment complex conditioning. And I've been thinking more about teenagers and children lately, and how a lot of them go through mental health stuff in their teens, and now there's things like ADHD and so many different conditions. And I went to a lecture and I was listening to this stuff, and I'm thinking to myself, you have like 30 kids in a classroom and you're getting them to sit in a desk for 6 hours a day. It's so boring. And it's like school is all about conditioning and programming us to be good and learn a certain thing, to participate in this society that is just brutal. It's not really a collaborative, cooperative society. It's competition and all that. So we're training kids for that. And not only that, the world is getting more complex. So there's so many more things to explore. Yet we're getting everyone to sit down at the same time and explore the same boring topic. And these kids nowadays, they know that there's so much more to explore. They could do more learning by themselves than they probably do in a classroom like that. And then we say these kids have ADHD. I don't think so. Dr. Daniel Siegel talked about that a system, it's a mathematical law, that a system is designed to move towards maximum complexity. And if it stopped from moving towards maximum complexity, it goes to either chaos or rigidity. And now you think about a child, it's designed to go to maximum complexity. And in the system of society, they're actually being trained into rigidity. And then the child reacts sometimes with chaos, like not being able to focus or fidgeting or whatever, and then they're called ADD or ADHD. To me, it's actually just part of mathematical law that there's going to be kids that can't do it. They're not really designed to do that. And even things like anxiety, I feel like it's an oversimplification, but children are naturally born with the ability to learn. And then they go to school and they're told to memorize, and that's not actually learning. And I feel like part of anxiety is actually to do with the fact that somewhere deep inside the child, they know they are being programmed to stop learning and to start conforming. And these feelings are actually just a warning sign of that. And I think it's really sad. I have a lot more thoughts on it, but it's really like humanity is becoming more complex. Before there's, the certain number of religions and a certain number of political parties and social classes, and you can kind of divide people up between that, and then it's all said and done. But now it's almost like each person is just a unique thing on their own, with no social class, no religion. They need to come up with that stuff for themselves. They need to learn it for themselves. So any religion, a person might come to the insights of that religion on their own throughout life without having to be told, this is what you need to follow. If a person is actually really learning, they may see those things for themselves. There's a difference between being told and seeing it for yourself. And seeing it for yourself is learning. Being told is not learning. So kids are getting tired of being told, and humanity is moving towards more complexity faster than humanity is able to adapt to not be judgmental. And that's unfortunate and sad, because really it's designed to move towards complexity. So now there's so many more people, say, changing genders, and that wouldn't have existed 200 years ago. There wasn't the medical technology, there wasn't the population, whatever, even though there might have been people feeling that way. But now it's come to the point where people can do that. What I'm saying is, how people choose to express themselves is infinite, and a person should be able to learn that within themselves without fear of judgment and persecution. And we could all approach each other as each person as just totally unique canvas, and they're learning about themselves and we're learning about ourselves, and we're learning together. And it's not about seeing differences, it's actually seeing sameness. And that's why I feel like the whole world centricity idea is very important, and that is seeing and learning together, which is we. So memes are me, 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 and the me judges, the me looks around and sees differences. But the we, and I made up a word called the we-go. Instead of the ego, which is based on memes and me, 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 we have the we-go, which is based on relationships and seeing the common humanity and what two people can learn together when they meet up. So it's about learning. And this ties into what Dr. Daniel Siegel talks about with the relational mind. The relational mind is the you in relationships, which is actually a we, because there's no relationship with nobody. It's the relationship with another person. So how we make we's. And Dr. Daniel Fisher talks about how psychosis is a monologue. And a monologue is one person in their head and not really in conversation with another person. They're in a conversation in their own mind with themselves and kind of lost in their own world. Well, this is a world of me. And a person is lost in the me. Even worse than a person that has this sort of normal, so-called normal me consciousness. And that normal me consciousness is able to relate with other people in normal me consciousness. But a psychosis me consciousness is a deeper monologue where someone's not actually relating to other people, because what they're thinking is hard to relate to other people. And so this we aspect is actually the relational mind, which is relating to other people. So there's an open dialogue approach to psychosis to help talk to people, to reconnect them to their social fabric, to reestablish their we's, and then in that way a lot of times their psychosis sort of resolves itself. And I feel like those people connect again with sort of the me level, but I also feel there's another way, is from ego consciousness to we go consciousness, which is like we go together and we're a we, and it's we go. So it's sort of relating with how we fit together, how we make a we, what can we bring out in each other that's the best, how can we help each other learn about ourselves and one another and the relationship. I feel like the protection is actually in the relational mind. And I was thinking about how in my first 3.5 years of being in the mental health system, I didn't have any adverse experiences. And I lived in community housing surrounded by, I might have interacted with 10 to 30 people a day where I lived. And then I moved out of there, and I lived for 2 years by myself. But I was working in a medical office, and I probably interacted with, 30 or 40 people 5 days a week through that. And so there was a lot of we making. There was a lot of interaction with people. And as soon as I disconnected from that, I have since been in the hospital 3 times. And so I'm really seeing the importance of that kind of community and how important community is, and making we's. Back to kids for a minute. We're giving them a shitty reality, and reality sucks, and they're having a difficult time. The only way to really help is to make reality better for them. That's not the only way. I'm sure there's other ways too. They're rebelling against what we're trying to give them, which is all this conditioning. And even if they do get the conditioning, it's making them anxious, or it's making them all these things. It's making them into little egos, and it's not really healthy.